is Teaching for Learning. I got the idea for Computerside Chats from actually my graduate advisor, who used to give me stacks of journals and say, hey, I don't have time to read these, but you do, so read them for me. Tell me what they say, and then I'll look really smart at the conferences I go to. So that's where the idea for these was born. And basically, I've read the book, so you don't have to, and I'm going to share some of the big tips and the important points from it, and then I will be giving you guys the opportunity to chime in. So today we're going to cover reading strategies and writing to learn. And this is the third session of the Computerside Chats. We've done 2 already this semester, and we've got 1 more coming up where we'll cover the last 2 chapters of the book. So the way this session works is the book is really organized beautifully for this, so I just kind of follow it as a guide. We start with the research in each chapter. I give you some best practices. We will then go over a few of the selected activities, and you guys are going to pick a favorite activity and then briefly discuss how you would use it in your class. So you guys will be voting and reflecting throughout this process, so hopefully we'll keep it really engaged. And just so you know, I will send you a copy of the PowerPoint after we're done. So if at any point you're like, I didn't get that, it's okay. I will send you the entire PowerPoint, which is nice because then you'll get even the ideas that we didn't have time to cover. So just so you know, we do keep all the participants muted during the session just to prevent weird background noise from coming through. But at any point, if you want to talk, you can unmute yourself and chime in. Just remember to remute yourself at the end of that. And also, some people feel more comfortable just chatting in, and that works beautifully. I've got Balan here with me, and he'll flag me down if I miss a chat so I can read it and then respond. So that tends to work really well. Do just make sure you're chatting to everyone so I can see you, and then we'll be in good shape. So if there's any questions, you can chat them into me. Otherwise, we are going to just get started. And Michael, just so you know, your webcam is still on, and I don't know why that is going that way, but it would help us if you're able to turn it off. If you could, that would be great. It gives us a better view, and so I can see all the participants at once. All righty. So we're going to start with Chapter 5. Oh, Julia. We have actually, Julia's question is, would the first few chapters be discussed again in the spring? We've actually used this book last spring, and then now we're using it this fall. The expectation is that I'm going to be picking a new book for next spring, but I'm glad that you mentioned that because we do record these sessions. And so we are working right now on editing the first 2 sessions so that we can put the videos up. So we'll do that for this one as well. The chat will go up, the video will go up, the audio will go up, and then you'll be able to see it after the fact. It's not quite the same because you don't get to participate and you don't get to guide the discussion the way you will as participants right now, but those will be available, but I don't think we'll do the book again unless people really want me to. So. Okay, so Chapter 5 is on reading strategies, and so here is what we're going to do. We'll start out with just some basics. I thought it was really valuable to see what some experts have to say about how important reading can be. Now, here's the deal. This isn't reading for students if they're in a reading class. These are techniques that you can use where you engage students in reading to encourage them to learn your course material better. So basically, I just threw in a couple of arguments for why reading is a valuable strategy for students to use. And somebody is unmuted. So the first thing is something I imagine all of you would agree with, that reading becomes a way for us to learn on our own. And the more we can help students learn through reading and become stronger readers, the better off they are for the rest of their lives. The next one, this comment is the big, I call it the big duh of our session. College students vary in their reading ability. I imagine that you guys have worked with students all across the spectrum in reading, and recognizing that is important, because if you're going to use reading to reinforce what you're teaching in your class, you have to recognize that different people will be getting different things from that. So that awareness is important. In addition, as a psychologist, one of my favorite things to share with people is that deep strategies for learning are almost always going to help us remember better and retain longer than shallow strategies or surface approaches. So whenever we can get our students to read and read in a deep way, and I'll give you guys some pointers on how to do that, we are actually reinforcing the information that they're learning and helping them maintain it for longer. So the strategies that you use as you support reading in your class are supposed to give students a goal for their reading. And if that goal is to engage deeply in the material, then you're going to have real benefits for your students. So that's kind of why this chapter is here, and why the authors argue that reading is an important way to guide students. So there's that. And again, at any point, if you guys want to jump in, please let me know. So first, we're going to talk about some of the research. These are best practices for reading strategies, and this chapter offers 4 best practices, 4 findings. So the first one, finding 1, guided reading helps learning. The authors argue that providing students with a document, a written document, to get them to understand how to interact with the reading material can be really valuable. It pays homage to the fact that our students can be anywhere on a reading spectrum, and it helps them understand what they need to focus on. Now, I'll be honest, this is an area of weakness for me. When I provide readings to students, I rarely provide a document to help guide them through the reading process, but it's something that this book has challenged me to try. So the authors call these documents ARDs, active reading documents, and research is supporting the idea that they're beneficial. I kind of thought of them as a crutch, but the research is really demonstrating that students will engage with the reading at a higher level if they are guided in what they need to focus on, and it does seem to result in improved learning. So something to consider, maybe develop some documents to help your students as they read. This semester, what I've been doing is providing a reflection on every chapter, and I just ask students a few key questions about the reading so that I know that they are going to be doing the reading with an eye towards what it is I expect them to find. So the second finding is that summarizing and annotating information improves learning. A lot of students, and you've probably run into them, honestly think that highlighting is enough. And then you'll have them open their textbooks and they've highlighted the whole thing. But it turns out that research is pretty clear. Highlighting is one of those surface methods. It doesn't really add much to our learning. It doesn't help with memory. But if you mark up the text in personal ways and add summarizing notes, if you try to convert the information into a different format, so instead of taking the written word, you convert it into a visual aid. Any of those kinds of markups on the text that you can get students to engage in, those will really help so much more than just highlighting or underlining or a post-it note on the page. The difficult thing is that most students don't know what strategies will work, and so they fall back on highlighting. But the research suggests, in this second one, that students who are taught a reading strategy that incorporates these techniques really score better on their course exams. So I feel like it behooves us to start, interspersing that information into our courses and share with students, hey, highlighting's not all that valuable, but if instead you write some comments or you share what this meant to you or you summarize it in your own words, that is really going to be where it's at. And the cool thing is, if you've done it well, you don't have to reread the chapter ever, which I find that is a good way to get them to consider this. So are there any questions so far? You can, again, unmute yourself and ask it, or you can just chat in. But so far, we've just covered the first 2 findings. Okay.
Hello?
All right. Yes.
Yeah, I had a question about reading docs. Have you seen any of these, or what exactly do they do? Do they just point out certain sections that are more important than others, or what?
They kind of run the gamut, and I'm going to bounce back to that slide so that you can see what I'm talking about. If you do a search for ARD, active reading document, online, when you Google it, you will get all kinds of different ones. And I particularly, sometimes I'll click on the image search because some people have made really pretty ones. But there's really interesting things. I'm trying to remember the one that I just did. But they've got all these cute names. There's the 1, 2, 3 approach, or there's the know, want to know, and predictions. So like there's different kinds of questions that you can ask. And I think one of the ones that I'll present to you today, yeah, there's some examples of those questions. But you can make them from the course objectives from your textbook and just point out or convert some of those objectives into questions. You can ask your own questions. But the idea is that very often students read a textbook the way they read a novel. And they think, as long as my eyes have glided over those words, I'm good. And the truth of the matter is we know that you don't read a textbook the same way you read a novel. You have to be looking for important things. You have to be taking notes on the stuff that seems like it matters. And so these documents are supposed to help students learn that technique of reading to learn instead of just reading for enjoyment. So does that make sense, Michael? Okay, so and like I said, when we get into the examples, you'll see some actual examples of these as well. But I found doing a quick search online, there's some really cool techniques that you can use repetitively so that students get into some good habits. So let's see. Stephanie.
Yeah, that was helpful. I'll try to look up some of those and see if I can see some examples. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can send you some afterwards too because I've been using them this semester.
Okay.
Stephanie says, do you have any research on teacher perspectives on these strategies? You know, I'm just presenting the research in the book, and in some cases they will talk about students like it, teachers like it, but in this section, most of the research seemed to be about the effectiveness, and that's what I presented. But I'll say I enjoy getting my students to focus on these things. So Renaissance says, should this be a semester-long process or just a few weeks? Oh, asking them to use these active reading documents, you know, it depends. I would say if you're in an intro class, I would say it makes sense to sort of ramp them up and then check in with them. I'm doing it for the entire semester in my human sexuality class because it's something I'd never done before, and I'm finding students are much more willing to participate when they had some guidance with their reading. So, all right. So hopefully that helps. All right, you guys. So finding number 3 is the next one. Question answer tasks improve learning. And Michael, this will speak to, again, the question that you asked before. The idea is you want to provide some questions that help students deeply engage with the reading, and they're arguing that high-level questions are the best. So if you just ask a fact-based question, like how old are kids when they blah, 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 that is not going to encourage students to read well because they can basically just skim, find the answer, and then write it. But if you're asking some questions that require some critical thinking, if you're asking questions that require reflecting or connecting the class material to the student's own experience, or you're asking them to convert the information, like, hey, there was an example formula on page blah, blah, blah. Can you convert it to something that would be valuable to handle this question? So high-level questions that really challenge students to not just find a passage, but to respond to a passage and summarize the passage. Those are the things that really seem most valuable. And I found this second bit of research really interesting. It's really up to you what you want to do. It says that as long as students are responding to questions, it helps them. whether those questions are written by the students and then they find their own answers, or whether the questions are written by the instructor and then the students just find the answers. Both of those seem to work equally well, and you have to decide what works best for you. Obviously, instructor-generated questions are more work for you, but they're less work for the student. And sometimes students are more willing to put in that effort to answer the questions if they didn't also have to come up with the questions. So I urge you to consider that and maybe mix it up. Maybe early on in the semester you create the questions, and then maybe as the semester moves on, you encourage students to take turns. Like, hey, you guys in group 2, you have to provide some questions for the reading next time. But to kind of spread that effort out to everybody. So I'm going to move on to finding 4, and then we can check in and see how everyone's doing. But if you have a question, do chat it in. The last finding is tying the reader to the experience improves learning. And this one, Stephanie, is according to students. But they will basically say that reading experiences are more enjoyable when they're challenged to tie the reading to themselves. I mean, who doesn't like talking about themselves, right? So that's not that huge of a surprise, but psychology also says that when we can connect stuff to ourselves, that it encourages longer-term learning. So it's not just that the students will rate these assignments as better, but there's some evidence from my field, at least, that it helps them learn as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pop them all up so you can see all of these. And this is a chance for you to rate yourself on these. I find it really informative when I learn of some best practices to really take an honest look. You do not have to share these with anybody. I would just do it on a little note paper. But here are the 4 best practices that we've just discussed, and I'd love for you to rate yourself from 0 all the way up to Rockstar on each of these. That'll help guide the rest of our session because you'll be able to keep an eye out for the actual teaching tips that might support you in the areas that you need more help on. So 1, are you offering reading guides? As I mentioned, that was a big area of weakness for me before. 2, are you helping students understand how to summarize and annotate rather than just highlight? 3, are you providing question-answer tasks so that students are not just reading and forgetting that they're going to have to retrieve this information later? And 4, are you tying the reading to their own personal experience? And in some classes, I'll say that's easier than others. I teach, psychology. It's super easy to tie that to students. Maybe if you're teaching chemistry, it's a little bit more difficult. So take a minute and rate yourself from 0 to Rockstar on each of these so you know which ones you want to be on the lookout for. And then let me know if you have questions, and we'll move on. So I got a question from Stephanie. Do reflection responses help with tying to the reader experience? Absolutely, as long as the reflection is a personal one. You guys, I feel terrible, but this semester I'm teaching human sexuality, so all of my ready examples have to do with human sexuality. So I apologize in advance. But for instance, I just had students do a reflection. They're going to be reading on contraceptive methods. And so I asked them to go through the reading and highlight the one contraceptive method that they thought they knew the most about ahead of time, and which one they thought they knew the least about ahead of time, and then read and share at least one new thing that they learned about each of those to kind of demonstrate to them that even if they thought they knew everything about this one, there's still more to learn. And that is a reflection, and it's tying it to them because it's not just what does anybody in the world need to know, it's what was a gap in my knowledge. So Stephanie, does that help? Okay, great. All right, so when you guys have had enough time with this to rate yourself, please just let me know, chat in with a little I'm good or a move on, thumbs up, and then I'll know that we're ready to go. All right, thank you guys. And I forgot to mention, I was looking at the list, we have people from all over the place here right now, so that's exciting. We've got several people from student development, we've got some developmental reading folks, physical therapy assistant, we've got sociology, psychology, first year seminar, English speakers of other language, so ESOL, and anthropology. And I may have missed somebody who joined in late, but I'm excited about this next section because I'm going to challenge you guys to share from your different fields how you'd be able to use this. Oh, Julia says she's self-evaluated. So Catherine asks, does this need to be specifically about textbook reading? Absolutely not. You know, that's an easy way to go. If you've already got textbook assignments, you can start to incorporate these things with it. But I have brought in extra readings. Sometimes to facilitate all those different levels of reading, I'll bring in a short one-page article into my class and have them read right there. It takes some class time, but it gives me a chance to assess how well they are able to read on the fly and then respond to materials. So it doesn't just have to be textbooks. You could say, hey, read this online article, or, you know, listen, you know, to, well, not listen, but you know, go to a website or something else. So what is, Renessa says, what is a thumbs down to sociology? What is a thumbs down? No, that wasn't a thumbs down. No, sociology is awesome. I was saying I was excited about all the fields. All right. Okay, so we are going to go now to the ideas for reading strategies. And I just had to give a shout out. The authors are so cute. IDEA stands for Intentionally Designed Educational Activity, and I love that. So in the ideas section, the authors generally provide about 15 of these, and we absolutely don't have time to go through that many, but here's the way I run these chats. I've got 5 for you, and you will get details on all 5 of these, but right now we're going to try to pick 2 or 3 that you guys would like to hear about. So I'm going to briefly give you a quick summary of what each one does, and then you guys are going to chat in to me to let me know which one you most want to hear about. So directed thinking, reading and thinking, students are actually challenged to make a prediction about the reading before they read it, and then after they read, they have to revise their prediction with what they actually learned. So that's an example of an active reading document, Michael, so it might be a good one for you. But here's where I was talking about. Any of those areas where you rated yourself more as a 0, these are the things where we can talk about ways to support that. So that's directed reading and thinking. What counts as fact? That is, and I've just been thinking about a lot because of the election cycle, and that information comes to us and people believe stuff is fact when it may just be an opinion. So essentially you're going to provide 2 different readings, 2 different sources that are covering the same topic, and you challenge students to look to see what evidence is provided by each resource, and then to kind of weight those and say, hey, which seems like more factual or which seems like better information, and learn a little bit about critical thinking and evidence versus theory versus fact. So that's what counts as fact, idea number 54. Oh, and when you guys chat in, you can just chat in with the number, and that makes it easier for me to tally up your votes. So the problematic situation, this reading technique is you present a problem, and then you provide students with a reading that you think has some information that will help them solve the problem, but you allow them to do the reading and attack the solution of the problem. And they can do that in groups or on their own. The next one's 3-level reading guide. This is another example of an active reading document, but you basically provide some questions that will help students assess a reading in terms of what it literally is saying, what they interpret it as trying to say, what they think it means, and then an application where they have to reflect and relate it to themselves. So the 3-level reading guide, we could go into some details about how to create those and talk about that. And that's idea 58. And then the last one is select a sentence, and this is one of my favorite back pocket techniques is what I call it, because it's super fast and you can kind of use it on the fly at any point. So select a sentence is you get students to read something and then pick out their favorite idea or favorite sentence from the reading and then submit that. And then there's a bunch of different things you can do with it once you have. So take a minute, and if you need any more clarification on any of those, let me know. But please pick one that you absolutely want to hear about. And I'm looking, Cynthia just chatted in. A good website for some quick reading articles that can be used as reader guides. Oh, great. So you put this article of the week. That is awesome. So there's a link there for some help with active reading documents. That would be wonderful. And see, this is why I love this, because you guys have great resources that you can share. So thank you, Cynthia. Okay, so now I'm digging through to see what everybody's voting on. So we've got 61, 61, 55. Ooh, 58 is getting some love. 1, 2, 3, 58. Oh, Laura, you voted on 2. That's cheating. You have to pick 1. 58, 54, 58. I can't follow the rules and pick 1. Well, see, now you've inspired Cynthia to cheat too. What is happening? It's chaos. All right, so we got 55, 58, 52. Oh, hi, welcome, Sri. I didn't see you before. 52, 52. I missed one. 60. Well, now I've got chemistry too. Catherine says chaos. All right. Okay, so got a goodly number of votes. Is there anybody who hasn't had a chance to chat in which one sounds interesting to them? All right, so right now it's looking to me like we've got 52, 58, and 61 as our winners right now. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start with 58 since it had the most votes. And that way, if we don't get to all 3, we will at least have hit the one that had the most interest. So we're going to start with 58, which is right there. Okay, so I apologize in advance. This is a pretty wordy little slide here, but again, you guys will get these as a take-home. So idea 58, and let me, well, I'll just jump in. This is a 3-level reading guide, so it's an example of an active learning document. And it is a specific design that was researched by this gentleman whose last name I'm not going to attempt to pronounce because I don't know if he's Hebert or Herber. But he has students dig through the literal, the interpretive, and the applied. And he argues that it inspires deep processing and teaches students how to read more effectively, which I couldn't agree more. So the way we're going to do these is sort of like a little recipe, what you have to do ahead of time, and then the process that you provide for your students. So the preparation is you have to pick the reading material ahead of time. They argue that starting with an easier document is a good way to launch off, and then as you move through the semester, if you use this multiple times, you can get more and more advanced as you go. And then you need to prepare your own notes for a discussion so that you have thought out what might be the literal, interpretive, and applied levels, because you want to have a jump on the students instead of being completely surprised by what they come up with. So once you have selected your reading material and you've got a good set of notes for yourself, the process is to first explain these levels of comprehension to your students. This is something that you would absolutely have to do the first couple of times, but once you've used this in class, students will know what you're talking about. So then this is the ARD itself. You have students and you can provide it in writing or you can put it up on the screen, however you like. You have them identify 8 literal facts. So 8 things that the reading just says. This many people last year were affected in this way. This element has, you know, this many electrons. I'm making stuff up, Sri, just trying for something chemistry-ish. But, you know, whatever facts it is that you're hoping that they'll be able to get from the reading, you get them to identify 8 literal facts. And then you're going to see how it kind of hones in on stuff and narrows down. Second, you get them to identify 4 to 5 ideas and interpret what the author might mean. So this isn't just a fact. Now the author has asserted something or the text suggests something and you say, I think that this is pointing to the idea of X. So 4 to 5 interpretive ideas. And then lastly, they need to write down 2 to 3 ideas that they can connect to other things. And this is really my favorite part. You can ask them to connect to stuff you've already done in the class, stuff they've learned in other classes, things that are personal to them. You can ask them to apply it by creating their own hypothesis. I did this just today in class. I provided students with a graph with some data, and I asked them to start sharing hypotheses that came to mind by looking at that graph. So the last part, that applied section, you can encourage them and give suggestions, or you can set it free. I think suggestions are good early on, and then again set them free later. And so you can do this as an at-home assignment individually, at-home assignment in groups, or you can have them do the reading ahead of time and then bring a copy with them to class so that they can try to do this in groups or on their own in class. And then you finish up with a report out with a discussion of ideas they found. Sometimes students are really excited to share their connections, and that would be something I would really encourage. Say, hey, can anybody connect this to something from our last class or from the last exam? And give them a chance to share what they've seen. And here is where your notes come in. If they haven't hit on some of the facts that you found most important, or some of the interpretations that you thought were most valuable, you can say, hey, just so you know, you guys had a really bunch of great ideas, but nobody stumbled upon this one. And this is key for me, and since I'm writing the exam, you might want to know that. But you can give them a little guidance, and it starts to help them understand how to read like an expert. If they regularly miss the points you thought were most important, they need to know that, and this is a great way to let them see. So what I like to do in these computer side chats is give you guys a second to gut check yourself on this. Rate it right now, and this one I do like for you to chat in. 1 means you don't like this idea. The 3-level reading guide is not all that awesome for you. And 5 is, oh my gosh, if you can pick a resource, you're going to be doing this next class. So chat in for a moment so I can see where you guys are on this one. Lauren gives it a 3. Catherine's giving it a 4. Stephanie, not so much. And Michael, just so you know, you're chatting privately. You might want to click on send to and hit everyone. So we've got some 3s, 3.5s, and 4s. Okay. And you know what? I think, just so you are aware, this is the original 3-level reading guide. You can absolutely cut it down. If your reading is shorter, maybe there aren't 8 literal facts. So you could do 3, 2, 1. You don't have to go with the numbers that are recommended, but this is the original, so I present it to you. So Julia says, because I'm not a teaching, of course that has reading right now, I'm teaching writing. Are there any readings on writing though? Like, do you ever have students read a paper on how to write well? And maybe that would be something that you could do. The other option is, if they're writing, you could challenge them to write these things in a paper. Hey, if you're reviewing something, you know, show me some literal facts, show me some applied facts, you know, just so that they can start to get those. But absolutely, it depends on the type of class. Okay, so the next one that we need to cover is idea 52. Has everybody gotten a chat in who wanted to? Okay, so idea 52, this was another one that you guys voted on. Oh, by the way, if you rate them highly, that is a good hint that you might be able to give an example of a way that you might use this in class. And I always like to get people to do that too. So be thinking about that. If you rated that last one highly, maybe how might you use it in your class? So directed reading and thinking. So this is where students use the process to really dig deeply into their reading, and you ask them to read with a goal in mind, and then that helps them dig in more deeply, I guess. So the way that you do this is that you first want to try it yourself. So you're going to have students, oopsie, I'm sorry, I'm moving this out of the way. You're going to have students skim and then do a little bit of predicting and then revising what they've done. So the authors suggest that you should maybe try it first. And here's why. Because if you pick an enormous reading, how are you going to predict from that? You need something that's a reasonable length. So try it a couple times, find out what an optimal length is for you and for your subject matter, and you're really the best person to decide that. And then once you've figured out a good length of a reading that you can use with this, you can move on. So I kind of think of this as a way almost to do a mini lecture, which we've talked about in previous sessions. Instead of just talking for your entire class period, if you talked for 10 to 15 minutes and then you give students some time to engage with the material, it seems to work better for them. This is almost the same thing but with reading. It encourages students to stop thinking that they can just read through an entire text. Go, all right, we're looking at this section. Interact with it, reflect on it, and then we move on. So the process, you ask students to read a title of a section, this can be from any kind of reading, and write down a little bit of what they already know. And then they are supposed to write down predictions and explain why they made them. So look at what the title is, what do you think is about to come, and then you've got 3 minutes for them to write down predictions and explain why. Then you give them some time to read the section, and then after that, a few minutes to think about the predictions that they made and decide if they were right, like were they right on, or do they need to make some changes. As a class, you then summarize the main concepts and ideas. So you can do this, and I do this like I mentioned with my reflections. The other day I had them, again, it's on sexuality. So I asked them to predict what the textbook authors were going to say was the appropriate age for kids to start having sex, or teens or adults. When is it okay to start having sex? I asked them to predict that first, and then I asked them to read, and then I asked them to say, now that you've read, do you agree with what you initially said? Are there any changes that you would make, and why? And that's an example of this directed thinking and learning. So you can do it in class, you can have them do it outside of class, but the big thing is when we predict what we're about to read, we engage with the reading in a very different way than if we didn't make a prediction. Now we're looking to see if we are right. You know, we're looking to find evidence to support what we just predicted, and that is a much deeper dive into the reading than when you just skim or read. So hopefully I've explained that well enough for you guys. And I'd like for you to do a gut check again and rate in whether this is something that you'd give a 1 to, it doesn't sound all that great, or whether this is very likely to be helpful to you. So that would be a 5. So take a minute and chat in. Let's see, oh, I see some have come in. Okay, so Julia says she uses this all the time because it's part of her textbook, so they have you do that. That's awesome. And Catherine says she likes it, just not sure how to work readings into class time. It can be a challenge. So shorter readings, or like I said, sometimes you can just say, hey, as a ticket to come back into class next time, engage in this. And one of the things I really like about this book is they're always saying, here's an idea. You're an educator. You will be able to tweak it in a way that makes more sense. So maybe you don't do it in class. Maybe you don't do it in groups when they say to, but you can alter it so that it works. Stephanie is liking this. Oh, she said, in developmental reading, you call that preparing yourself to read. And yeah, it's a really good way to get people to think about what they're about to do. All right, so we've got some 4s and some 3s. Yeah, Lauren, you're right. It's fun, and it's interesting that students sometimes are surprised. Sometimes they're really good at their predictions, and sometimes they're not so good, and that's valuable for them to see. It's a metacognitive activity. It's that thinking about thinking. Sounds great, but time-consuming. Yep. Michael, I'm going to say some of the best activities are like that. Very often we've got this tendency to just want to throw it all out there, and what I've been learning is that when students are given the chance to really take some time to dig in, the learning is much more meaningful. So it's a balancing act, and you guys are the best people to determine how to balance that in your own classroom. Oh, Catherine says, yeah, the tickets. Yeah, so that's called the ticket to class. You could do a ticket to enter class or a ticket to leave class. It can be a very low stakes activity. You can do it for extra credit, but this can be a great one for that. Renison says, not sure I could use with textbook reading. You know, Renison, if you have a section that your students typically miss on your exams, you could just copy that, that one page or 2 pages of the text and bring those into class. And now you have a way to give them a deep dive on something that you know they're going to struggle with, and you could do this or one of the other reading techniques. But I think that sometimes we go, oh, it's so much. But if we break it down, if we remember what we've learned from previous exams, we can help them guide their thinking. Cynthia says it can be a challenge to be more creative with it. Yeah, you know, you're right. It's pretty much, it's just make a prediction, but you can sometimes give suggested predictions. So predict, you know, a specific finding that you're going to see, or predict a specific recommendation that the authors are going to make, instead of just saying a general prediction. That can help. So Jennifer says it's kind of like the FQ, yeah. Oh, you have a different FQ. I always like FQ3R or something, but must be a similar thing. And Julia says she can do it quickly. Give them 5 to 10 minutes to scan the article. Yeah. So great job, you guys. All right. So, well, I'm going to let you guys decide whether we want to do the last one, which is select a sentence, or whether you guys want to start trying to generate some ways that you might use this in your class, because I want to be respectful of time. So let's see, we're at 3:49. So I could do either way. So Renaissance voting for do the last one. I'm taking a drink of water while you guys tell me. Okay, all right, so we're going to do the last one, but hopefully you guys are, your creative juices are flowing and you're coming up with some good ideas for us. Okay, so this one, select a sentence, is another one that I've used as a ticket to come to class or as a ticket to leave class, but it's a really fun thing to do. So students are basically asked to, in a reading of whatever length, find one sentence that was particularly important or meaningful to them. And then they have to basically summarize it in their own words and share something about it. So the preparation for this, you've got to, again, you've got to do the reading first and identify your own key themes. Again, that's because students aren't experts in our field, and sometimes what they think is most important, we're like, you're out in left field, people. Like, here's what matters. So to ensure that they are going to be focusing on the right stuff eventually, you want to know what the key points are in your mind. I always think about, what am I likely to stick on the exam? I'm going to mention those in my list so that if they're not brought up in class, I can help the students with them during class. And you can also develop some good questions that are going to probe why students selected their sentences, because there's nothing worse than just going, why? Why'd you pick that? But really, why? So come up with some other things, like who picked one that they thought was surprising, or who picked one that they thought was challenging to understand. So those kinds of probes. So the process, and again, you can do it individually or in groups. You challenge students to pick the significant idea or concept. You give them 3 to 5 minutes to do that. Then you ask students to share their sentences. The authors recommend, just as students like say what they want to say, you can write it down on the board. I've actually asked students to write them down on an index card or a sheet of paper, and then that way I can read it much more easily and I can just share it that way. Or you can stick them up on a wall even if you want to. Then you help students group the concepts by theme. This part I think is super cool because, and I keep talking about these in these sessions, we experts, we connect things together in ways that novices don't. And so when students read and they pick one topic over here and one topic over there, if you can help them connect them to each other, it's really valuable. So if you put up a bunch of sentences and then students come up to the board and they go, oh, these 3, they all connect in some way. This one's kind of different, so I'm going to put that over here. So you can give them time to interact with those sentences, and that can be really valuable. And you can ask them during this process, hey, why did you pick this? And what, where do you think this belongs? And how would you connect it with something else? And a variation on select a sentence is to ask them to find the most confusing sentence. in a reading segment, because then they are going to point out to you where they need help. And I think that's a brilliant strategy, because very often we assume that students are reading and understanding everything, but if we ask them to highlight what they're struggling with, we can really jump in as experts and help them. So I see I've missed a few. I see I've missed a few of these chats. So let me take a peek. Yeah, I've heard that activity. It's the golden line. So it's the same exact thing. Select a sentence is the golden line. And so Stephanie's given it a 5, and you guys can go ahead and chat in with your ratings. That would be awesome. In the integrated reading and writing course, she does this as a class exit ticket and a writing exercise. It helps them when they have to find material or ideas for an essay. Yeah, that's a great idea. And if you do it as a ticket to leave the class, you don't have a chance right then to connect those things with the students, but you could do it on another day, or you could email a bunch of your favorites to students and say, hey, can you try to find some connections between these? Yeah, oh, you guys are liking this one. That's great. I'm glad. So grouping them together in class will take a lot of time. You might be surprised, Lauren, because a lot of times there'll be people who are picking almost the same ones. So very quickly you'll go, oh, this is the same, or this is the same, and the students can do that. Or alternatively, you can collect a bunch of individual ones, and then you can pass them out to small groups. And then each group is just trying to make some connections, so you don't have to, as a class, connect all of them. And that can maybe limit the amount of time that you have to devote to that. Did that one make sense, Lauren? Having them do it in groups, those connections. So Julia says maybe as a homework assignment with clear guidelines. When she's tried, the students have grabbed any random sentence. Yeah, if you tell them ahead of time that they're going to have to justify their choice, that should narrow that down a little bit. But yeah, you definitely have to give good instructions to make sure that they're not just at the last minute going, found one, and then using that. All right, well, great job, guys. So we got some good votes on that one, too. So to wrap up this section, I want to know, and we didn't cover all of these, right? We covered the directed reading and thinking, the 3-level reading guide, and select a sentence. So does anyone want to just jump in and chat? We've already seen a little bit of this, but how you might use this in your class. Like if there's one that you gave a 5 to, or one that you are really excited to try to use, maybe take a minute and chat in what your idea is and how you would use it. And the reason I like to do this is sometimes it's hearing somebody from a completely different discipline, hearing how they're going to use it is going to inspire you in a way that you wouldn't have expected. So I love it when we share our totally different disciplines. So I'm going to drink again. You guys chat. All right. Okay, so we're getting some of these in. Thank you, guys. So Catherine says that her class does 54, what counts as fact, as an in-depth comparison between mainstream news article and peer-reviewed research. What? I love that. And the authors didn't even say to do that. That is a brilliant idea. So you can pull something off the internet, and then you can find a peer-reviewed article and show students the difference with how people have to back up their evidence and how people have to connect hypotheses to theory. I love that. What a brilliant idea. Renison says he uses guiding questions as a way to prep the reading. So that directed reading and thinking, to tell them ahead of time what they're going to be reading and get them to think about it, or else that 3-level reading guide. I don't know which one you're talking about. But yeah, those questions to prepare them to read is super important. Okay, 52. Okay, so that directed reading and thinking. That makes sense. So Catherine says there is so much bad nutrition information, so this is a big project for them to compare information on many levels, credibility, funding, hypotheses. That's a great idea. Yeah, so if you're in a field where there's some junk science and some great science, doing what Catherine is suggesting sounds like a really great idea to get them to compare and see the clear difference between those. I love that idea. So what else do you have for me? All right, so Cynthia is saying she has a research paper unit coming up, and she thinks the 3-level reading guide might help them prepare for their paper. That's a great idea. Yeah, because when I've done research papers, sometimes students just don't have a good handle on how to read a research article, and they don't know exactly how to start processing it so that they can put those ideas into their paper. But using that guide would help them, because exactly, they're going to have to provide some facts in their research. They're going to have to provide some interpretations and some connections. So it really lends itself to a research paper activity. That sounds really brilliant. Love it. Julia says she's currently teaching a class that has reading, writing, speaking, listening for the TOEFL test. And students are weekly summarizing articles. Okay, so you've got articles that they have to summarize, so maybe that 3-level reading guide, instead of just summarizing randomly, to get them to be looking specifically for facts and for interpretations and for applications. I think that sounds great. And then Catherine says she does 55, the problematic situation case studies. Yes. So whenever you've got a real applied situation, like in a case study or something like that, if you give them reading to provide help in assessing the case study, that would exactly be the problematic situation. Super cool, you guys. All right. Is there anybody else who wants to chat in with some ideas? I'm going to start to move on to the next chapter, but if you guys have some more, please chat them in. This is really my favorite part, because I love seeing what you guys are doing. And I'm totally going to try that comparison of peer-reviewed versus online article. I love that. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to chapter 6, but again, if you have some things that you want to jump back, I'm totally excited to do that. So, okay, this is writing to learn. So instead of doing reading activities, this is all about writing. I am going to just skip this slide. It'll be available for you in the PowerPoints, but basically the research is saying that writing, it not only improves your confidence in writing, but it improves your understanding of information, which shouldn't be that surprising. I know for a lot of you, if you take notes on something or put something in your own words, you know the power of that. The tricky part is students don't always know. So giving them assignments that allow them to write really can help them understand the material in ways that they'll find surprising. So we're going to go through these best practices kind of quickly, you guys, because I really want to get to the ideas and the sharing part. So finding 1, pre-work writing activities improve learning outcomes. The idea here is very much like with the active reading document. If you help scaffold students learning and scaffold students writing, they get better outcomes. Very often students don't think of themselves as good writers, and if you just provide them even the most awesome writing assignment, but it's huge, it almost seems insurmountable, and they will really get scared and then they'll give up. It's that freak out experience. And so instead, and I forget who mentioned this, who was it who said that they were going to do Cynthia. So Cynthia, this is almost exactly what you were just leaning towards doing. If instead of saying, here's a research paper, have fun, people, if you say, hey, I want you to look at this paper and I want you to find these things in it, that is a huge help, because it's a step-by-step process that helps guide them to the kind of writing that you're hoping to see, and that's super valuable. All right, so that's finding 1, providing some pre-work activities instead of just doing the whole assignment all at once. Finding 2 is teacher-assigned structure improves learning. Look, you guys, there is so much research on this right now, and I encourage you to take a peek at, there's something called the Transparency Project out of University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I'm in love with this, and I'm in the process of converting all of my writing assignments to facilitate this Transparency Project approach. Because what they say is very often we as experts will phrase our assignments in terms that make complete sense to us, but that aren't necessarily sharing with our students what we're expecting of them. And so what you need to do is provide them with help. Ask them exactly what you want them to tell you. So instead of just saying, hey, read this journal and tell me what you think, say, find these things in the journal. Or if you're going to say, hey, write a paper on your reaction to what we did in class today, that's just too broad. You want to specifically say, I need a paragraph on this. I need a paragraph where you connect it to yourself. I need a paragraph where you're going to do this other thing. And so the more structure you can offer, the better. And I know it often feels like hand-holding, and I know it often feels like it almost seems like you're dumbing it down, but you've got to provide those initial structures to help them do better later. And so this is why I encourage people to do more than one writing assignment. My students this semester have to do 22 pagers for an A, and they're quick to grade because they're short. But each time I give a little bit less guidance so that by the end I can say, write this paper, and they can do it. But you really want to give some good writing prompts. All right, finding number 3, we're digging through all these and then we'll take a minute to reflect on them, so bear with me. Writing that connects content to students' life experiences improves learning. This is just what we were talking about in the last section. If you get students to connect reading to themselves, if you get students connect writing to themselves, it helps. They are now, instead of just memorizing these random facts about your class, they are connecting it to a web of knowledge that they already have, and it's way easier to find that information later. So making that connection will help them retain it, it makes it easier to retrieve, and it really does help them do better on exams. So lastly, feedback. Feedback. It takes time, you know, but every time you share a little bit of your expertise with a student in response to what they've written, it really matters. Getting them to read that feedback, that's a challenge, but hopefully most of our students will be motivated to read this. And it is especially easy if you have them do these scaffolding type assignments, because now they have to read your feedback from part 1 to be successful on part 2. So the idea is that if you just ask students to write and then you don't write anything back to them, they find it frustrating, and they just don't tend to learn as much from the experience if there's no feedback. So consider really taking some time to give feedback. Julia says she tries to have face-to-face feedback regularly. That's awesome. And then you explain your written feedback. You know, you guys, that is a great idea. And then also, I just learned on Blackboard there are voice authoring tools. So if you've given written feedback and you don't feel like it was as clear as you wanted, or if you want to abandon written feedback, you can basically do a little mini podcast for your students as you read their paper and go, ooh, I really like that sentence. And, you know, it helps with writer's cramp too. So there's some really cool voice authoring tools in Blackboard. But face-to-face is awesome too. I like that even better. So here's where you get to look at all those best practices again. And I know we went through them pretty quickly, but a lot of them connect back to what we were doing last time. So I think that these should be easy to, oh, Cynthia, yeah, go take a peek. It's really interesting. So these are the 4 best practices from Writing to Learn. And I want you to, again, privately rate yourself on these so you know which ideas to be looking for in the next section. So 1, do you help students with pre-work writing activities? Do you scaffold them? Do you start out a writing assignment with a bite-sized chunk and then build on that? 2, do you provide a lot of structure? Do you help them understand rubrics can do this? If you provide rubrics, it can really help them know what you're looking for. Paragraph by paragraph guide, some suggested questions to answer, but some kind of very clear structure. And again, on this, I encourage you to take a peek at that transparency project from University of Nevada, Las Vegas. It was a mind blow for me. So some kind of structure that helps students understand what's expected of them. So also rate yourself on requiring that students connect the writing to their own life experiences. Of course, this is easier in some courses than others, but when possible, it really helps. And quite frankly, you can use a cheat. If your course isn't one that automatically connects to student experiences, you can ask them to connect this writing to a previous section of class. And then that way, it's not a personal thing, but it's information they already know that they're connecting to. And then lastly, rate yourself on providing feedback. How often do you do that? How good do you think you are at it? All right, so I'm taking a peek. We've got some chats. Michael says when he grades paper, he enters edits and comments using track changes from Word, and then he has them review those and incorporate the suggestions. That's a great idea. So you are guaranteeing that they're going to read your feedback and that they're going to be able to use it. And the track changes is a really great way to do that because you can comment, you can actually make edits, and it's valuable for them. I like that idea. Carlene says, rubrics and examples of A+ work has resulted in much better work. Carlene, I love that idea. Very often we think if we provide an example that students will just cheat off of it, but I find on the contrary that it raises the level of effort that students put in, because when they're able to see, oh my gosh, it took that to get an A, now they can do that level of work as well. So I'm glad you're having good luck with examples and rubrics. And Catherine likes rubrics as well, and those examples, yeah, they're very valuable, and you don't have to do them every time. Maybe a rubric this time, an example next time, or do them both, but they can really be valuable. So Catherine says the commenting tools in Blackboard are useful. Yes, I've been having my students turn in all their work on Blackboard, but just FYI, those of you, if you haven't used it in the past, you can only use the commenting tools in Blackboard if students submit certain kinds of documents. So like PDFs work and docs work from like Microsoft Word, but OpenOffice, they have to convert it to a PDF. And also, strangely enough, if they type directly into the assignment window, you have no commenting tools, which I don't know why they did that. But that was something I learned the hard way the first semester I used Blackboard, is I had them type it right in there and then I couldn't comment. So I'm looking at some more. Okay, so those are, so Cynthia is using rubrics as a way to guide before the project. And so yeah, that's a good example of a pre-work writing activity. And then also for feedback discussion. So, oh, I love that, you guys. So yeah, rubrics are for more than just grading. They can really start a discussion with your students and help ensure that they have what they need to be successful. So I love that you guys are having good experiences with those. It can take a while to create, but I often find that once I've written a couple of rubrics, I can, kind of boilerplate those and then just add assignment-specific material, and it gets a lot easier. And plus, if you're just exploring rubrics, type in rubric creator into Google, and you will find all kinds of really cool online resources to help you get good at rubric writing. So, all right, has everybody had time to rate themselves here? And if you have, please just give me a quick yes, go. Okay, Carlene, thanks. All right, so once again, we're going to look at some ideas. And thank you, guys. And these are from the Writing to Learn section. So here are our 5. For time, I think we're probably going to wind up just getting to pick 2. So as we're going through them, you can just start chatting in the numbers that appeal to you, but you get 1 vote this time. 1 vote. So speak, write pairs. Idea 64, partners are going to work together and they are planning out a writing assignment. So this is a pre-work activity. You give them a writing assignment, you sit them down in pairs, and you say, all right, you have to talk to your partner and share where your brain is going on this assignment. Just shout out some things you're thinking about. The other person has to take notes on what they're going to do. And then they switch, and then they discuss. And it's a really valuable way to get that brainstorming session out. And then you've got a peer to give you feedback right away. It's kind of a lovely idea. So that's speak, write pairs. Graffiti board. This one is an informal writing activity. It can be helpful to get students over their fear of writing. And so you can do it on the board, or you can have posters hanging up in the classroom, but you provide a prompt on the reading, on something you've just covered in the lesson, and you ask students to just write really brief comments on it. So just getting them over the fear of the written word. And that's graffiti board. Idea 65. Sentence passage springboard. Excuse me, this idea number 69 is much like the golden line that we just did, except that you get students to pick a sentence. They have to completely summarize it in their own words. I've even played taboo with it. I tell them they can't use any of the words in the original sentence, and that makes it really hard, but it's challenging and fun. Wikipedia article. This is a new one this semester. I picked it because you can actually get students to understand how to write well and provide good information, strangely enough, if you use Wikipedia as an example. Now, I'm not saying it's always the best resource for research papers, but if you show students a Wikipedia article and you can see that they have to provide, headers and they have to provide resources, you can put students in groups and get them to create their own Wikipedia articles on stuff you've taught them in class. You can either do this with an eye towards actually submitting to Wikipedia, or to create your own classroom wiki that you can then save and use in future semesters. So it's kind of a cool thing to do. That's a longer term project. Yesterday's news, this is essentially, and you can do it at any point, but you ask students to summarize the last class. So you could do it at the end of this class. What did you just talk about? You could do it when they walk in the next day and say, hey, y'all have to summarize what we talked about last time. Any way you do it, but the idea is you challenge students to summarize the entire session for a student who ostensibly wasn't there. So that's yesterday's news, and that's number 73. So I'm going to ask you guys to chat in your favorite one, and I see people have already started, so I'm going to scroll back. And I'm going to write some down, and we will try to get through at least 2 of them. Back, my tally sheet. Okay, so I've got a 71 and a 65. Sorry, I talk when I write. Okay. All right, so it is looking like, is there anybody else who still wants to go? Sharon, just so you know, you're chatting privately. If you can go to send to and click on the drop down and then scroll all the way up to the top and pick everyone, then everyone will be able to see when you chat in case you want to share something everyone can see. Is there anybody else? Okay, so it looks like right now we've got 6 votes for graffiti board, and we've got 3 for yesterday's news, so we will cover those 2, and we will see where we're at the end of that. So, 65. All right, so here is graffiti board, and this one is another one of those really nice back pocket writing ideas, and I love having a bunch of these where if I come to class and I don't have a specific plan of an activity, I can just whip them out and just go with them. And this is a really great example of it. And it also is really great early in the semester to get students over their fear of writing. So you essentially, for you, you're going to create a prompt based on a previous lesson or on the reading that you're expecting students to come to class having done. You could do it on other things as well. And then you select a medium where you're going to be able to collect the graffiti, and you want to make sure you have a lot of implements to write with. So when I do this, I usually will just use the whiteboard, and I just bring tons of markers in different colors. You can do it with a chalkboard. Like I said, you can bring in a giant piece of paper and then bring markers to write on there, however you want to do it, but pretty easy prep. And then you can place students in groups to react to the prompt so that they are not doing it by themselves. And this is one thing that gives them a chance. They're going to sit there and think about it first, and then they can respond. You can also do this individually, but a lot of this book is focusing on the power of groups and how it lets students feel a lot less scared about sharing when they have backup from some peers. So the process, you place students in groups, you give them time to add their graffiti, they need to respond to the prompt if they in whatever way you encourage them to. Some suggestions are informal, creative. Let them know that this isn't where they're going to be graded on using the biggest words they can find or the most advanced writing forms. This is very informal. And then if you've done it where Each group is in one section of the board. Everybody can just step back and take a peek. If you've done it where there's just one prompt for the whole class, everyone can look. But you basically give some time to discussing what has been written. One of the other things that's really valuable is to have students here. Once all of the things are written up on the board, you can ask them to use another marker to put a dot by their favorite one. And that's just a little bit of feedback for students to see that, oh, people appreciated my thoughts, or gives the class a chance to say, oh, this maybe is a really good response. And then you can say, oh, I like that one too, or hey, I might have picked this one. So really the whole idea is to just get the class involved either in groups, as a class whole, looking at a question, responding to it with the written word, and to get over that fear of writing. So if I've explained it well enough, do a quick gut check for me. Let me know whether this sounds like something you'd want to try. 1 is not likely to be useful to you. 5 is you really like this idea. Okay. All right, so we're getting some good 5s. So I'm excited to hear in a minute what topic you might use this with. Is there a reading that your students have struggled with, or are there some questions that you consistently see them doing poorly on the exam with and you would like a chance to give them some help? And I really will tell you, I have done this before where I put a few questions that I know will appear on the exam. I don't tell them it's going to appear on the exam. It's like a gift. If they were in class that day, now they've got a chance to attack an exam question without even knowing it. I just like that because if my students bombed on an exam question last semester, this gives me a chance to, while they're working on it, give them feedback. Oh, that's a good way to attack this question, or oh, wow, let's think about that some more. All right, so we've got running the gamut there. We've got some 5s and some 4s, all the way down to a 2. So short essay writing, you could absolutely do that, do a really quick little mini essay on a graffiti board. I think that would be a lot of fun. All right, so that is the graffiti board. And the other one y'all wanted to see was yesterday's news. So let me pull that one up. Here we go. All right. So yesterday's news, you guys, this one I think is a super cool idea. And last semester when we did it, some of our colleagues had some great ideas that I'll share with you. But the idea here is information is hard to learn when you don't take ownership of it. But as soon as you start to say, no, I get this, I understand it, here's how I interpret it, it's an empowering thing for students and they can retain that information longer. So the way you do this is you create a template for what you're asking students to do. So again, this is that pre-work, this is the teacher-provided structure that the authors want us to try to do. So you need to let them know exactly what they're supposed to pull out. You don't just say, hey, summarize last class. Share 3 most important points from last class, or share 2 incredibly important things to know and 1 thing that the class seemed to struggle with. You are going to want to provide them with specific questions that they are going to attack in writing their summary. So again, it's flexible. So you're going to have to decide how long they have to do it, whether they're doing it in class or out of class, and just let them know how it's going to take place. Give them a brief amount of time for the writing if it's an in-class activity, and then you collect the results and you share some findings. Now, they encourage doing this at the beginning of class. So everybody comes in, you give them this assignment for them to summarize the previous class, so that before you launch into the new material, students have already started connecting back to what they did last time. And I love that. I think that's a really valuable way to go. But one of our colleagues last semester said, even if you're doing an in-class course, if you're using Blackboard, you can have a discussion board where at the very beginning of the semester, you assign each student 1 day where they have to summarize, or 2 students each day where they have to summarize, and then post it on the discussion board. And then that way, students who actually did miss class have a summary written by a student. And you can go into the discussion board and go, oh, this is great, or oh, I think you should add this. You seem to have forgotten this point. But that way, it's written and it's stored for students. And I just thought that was a brilliant idea. So anyway, I think of this one as one that is super flexible. You could do it at home, you could do it on discussion boards, you can do it in class, but I'd love to see what you guys think about it. So you guys are already voting, thank you. So we've got so Sri is saying maybe she could use this for bonus points. I think that's a brilliant idea. Like, hey, if you do this, you get some extra points, and now they've taken ownership and they've practiced rating. So Catherine, so what about students who missed the last class? Well, this could be a challenge, but I'll tell you this. I post my slides on Blackboard, and I tell students that they should never come to a class without knowing exactly what happened in the last class. And so if a student came to me and said, I don't know what happened last class, I'd be like, did you look at the PowerPoints online? Did you talk to a classmate? I have a handout that I give that's called What to Do If You Miss Class, and it walks them through the process of how not to be lost. So I'd say that right there, Catherine, is an opportunity to remind students of their responsibilities if they do miss class. Renison says he would do this at the end of class so he could lead the next class with problem issues and elaborate. That's a great idea. So if you have them summarize at the end of class, you very quickly will learn what they missed, and you can then prepare your next lesson, or like you mentioned, discussion board on Blackboard, you can share, oh, I heard some concerns about this material, here's how I would ask you to study for it, or here's how I would ask you to attack it. So that's a great idea, Renison, I love that. This one's getting some, this one's getting some good reviews, like this for a discussion board. Cynthia, yes, I will try to remember this, but if you will shoot me an email right now or after this session saying, hey, share that what to do when you miss class document, I'll send you guys a Word version of that when I send you this PowerPoint. So Jennifer says she's mixed. So is there anybody out there who's really excited about this who might share why Jennifer should bump up her 3 rating to something higher? So we've got several 5s, so maybe you guys can share how you're going to use this. Do you want to use this beginning of class or at the end, like Renison says? What kinds of things might you put as your template? What kinds of questions might you ask? So chat in with some of the ways you guys could use this. No pressure, Jennifer, you don't have to change your rating, but I want to see what they come up with. So I want to encourage students to come to class. Absolutely, but you know what? I'm going to say even if they get a summary, being in class is better. And I tell them that all the time. So Carlene says that's my feeling too. Yeah, you know what? You guys, I used to be in that camp, and it's fine if you're there and if you stay there forever. But nowadays, I kind of think they're going to learn at some point that getting a short summary or even seeing all my PowerPoints is not the same as being here. Like right now, we're recording this. I'm going to put this up. Your colleagues can watch this without being here. I'm going to say I really hope and believe that you guys are having a different experience than the people who watch this will. And once you share that information with students, you can give them a whole lot of support without worrying that they're not going to come to class. So I'm catching up on chats here. So Julia says probably use it at the beginning of class to remind ourselves of grammar rules we learned. So hard to keep that stuff straight. I couldn't agree more. And often too, Julia and everybody, if you show something at the beginning of class, especially if you say, hey, let's try to summarize this without using your notes, oh my gosh, that immediately gets students to recognize if you haven't looked at this material since last class, you're going to lose almost all of it. And that metacognitive understanding will encourage students to review their notes more. So I think this one is normally done where, hey, use your notes or talk to each other, you know, use a lot of resources. But if you challenge them to try to remember without any materials, they will very quickly see how much they lose even in just a few days. And then it gives them a good launching pad to get better at it. So Renison says it helps him get immediate feedback on how he's communicating, and the students appreciate the quick response. I think that's brilliant because, yeah, it's hard to know whether students are hearing what we're giving out or not, and this will allow you to see that. Sharon says the physical therapy assistance course is incredibly fast with so much info, would be awesome. Yeah, so you can even say, all right, hey, you, person number 1, you have to record the stuff from this section, and you record the stuff from that section. So you can crowdsource and get a lot of help. Julia says she thinks it would be beneficial to those who are making the summary. Yeah, so the writing aspect is beneficial to the person doing the summarizing, but also to the other students. Yeah, and Jennifer, there's a benefit to being in class. And oh, sorry, I like that. You could do it at the end of chapter. So instead of saying yesterday's news from lesson, you could ask them to summarize a chapter at the end of the chapter. That's a lovely idea. I think that's, see, this is why I love this. You guys come up with these things that I wouldn't have thought of. What a great idea. Okay, so we kind of already jumped into this, but if you want to take a minute to share any of the other things that you might want to do, we already did a little bit on yesterday's news, but if you want to jump back into the idea of the graffiti board or any of these that you think you heard enough about, go ahead and chat that in. We've just got a few more minutes, but I'd love to hear more because I always like that. I might be pushing it for time, huh? Okay, so Carlene says she did number 65 on evolution, or the graffiti board. On 4 different posters, students had to list facts, draw evolution, list evidence, and write questions they had. Ooh, I love that. So you're getting them to practice with the material, but then also to write the questions that they have so that you're there right then to give them feedback and help. It's a lovely idea. And so Julia says using the graffiti board for our next essay. So are you, oh, for brainstorming, what a great idea. So, and I'm going to encourage you, Julia, read over when I send you this PowerPoint, the speak-write pairs, because I think that's a super cool way, especially for ESOL students, to start brainstorming on a project that they have to do. But the graffiti board would work beautifully, too. I think that's a great idea. Oh, you already do that one. Oh. She's all advanced, you guys. She does that one already. I had never heard of it, so to me it was a mind blow, but that's what's cool about different disciplines. Everybody has different cool ideas. All righty. So I'm going to let you guys, if anybody's typing stuff in, I want to see it, but I want to just go ahead and remind you of a couple things before we head out, because I think we're just at time. Please, please, please take a minute to make sure you've chatted in your ACC email address and your name so that I can give you credit for attending. And also, every time you attend, it's like 1 raffle ticket to win the book. So I'm giving away, we have 5 copies of this very book here signed by all of the authors. And so at the end of all the Computerside Chats this semester, I'll be giving away those 5. So if you want to win a book, please make sure you send me your email address. And I do believe we had some people join late that I didn't know were here. So perfect. Renison already got the book. That is true. But please take a minute to chat that in so I can give you credit as well, because you'll get an hour and a half of professional development credit. So I just want to thank you guys for being here, and I really do, because I hope you see how powerful it is when faculty share their thoughts with each other. I mean, you guys know your stuff the best, and you have developed innovations that your colleagues will learn from. So whether you do another one of these sessions or whether you talk to your colleagues, just spend some time sharing what you do, because I think it is the most powerful form of professional development when we talk about what it is that we love to do. So you guys are being very sweet. Well, thank you for coming. Please do take a peek. The website here has a link to our last session. We're going to do this one again, so don't sign up for the other November session, but you might want to do the one in December. It'll be on the last 2 chapters of this book. There are other opportunities. All of the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning events that we do, we always have some time for faculty to share their best practices with each other. So it's basically at the root of everything FCTL does. So if you like that kind of thing, take a peek. If you use one of these techniques and you want to write a blog, there's a place at the FCTL webpage where you can write a blog that you can share an innovation that you developed with your colleagues. And I love for people to do that. So you can subscribe to the blog, you can just read it, but you can also submit one. So what I'm going to be doing from here is I will send you these PowerPoints probably tomorrow. And then also coming up soon, you'll get an anonymous email evaluation. And I'd really appreciate all of you doing that one if you have time, because it helps me improve these sessions so much. So And if you guys remind me, somebody shoot me an email about that, what to do if you missed class, and I will add that into this email. So I look forward to seeing you guys at future Computerside Chats. If you liked it, share it with a friend because these are fun. The more people we have to bounce ideas off of. And looks like we got a few more emails, so that is great. And thank you guys. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I enjoyed having you. So yeah, the book club without the book, Renison, is what I call this. You don't have to read the book, you just get to learn about it. So you guys, thanks so much. I will stick around for a couple of minutes, but you are welcome to leave. If you have any last minute questions, chat them into me, and I will hopefully see you next time. Ta-ta for now, Carlene. Thank you guys.